Testing. Is the music even coming through? All right. Well, hopefully the music was piping through. Trying to create a little bit of a vibe here. If it wasn't, it was just me awkwardly sitting in the basement with a jellyfish lamp. Good day, all. Again, this is somewhat one-sided, as I cannot see or hear you. The only communication link I have to you is via the chat, which I am going to continue to check. If you have your own laptops and if you are following along, that's fine. Believe me, I'm not farming for views or subscribers. The only people that are probably going to watch this video are literally you. And we have less than half an hour at this point. So I think I'm going to dig right in. Wanted to take the time to do this because it's been, a week since I've been there. I know I wasn't there last Friday. Thought I'd give you a little bit of a health follow-up. Went to a specialist, and they did spinal injections of like corticosteroids into my spine in the hopes that that will help with the disc herniation and nerve pain. So we shall see. Anyway, health report is not why you are here. I actually think that one of the best ways that I can keep this focused and helpful is actually to sort of do more of a screen share type thing and kind of type notes as we go. Again, people are going to ask, should we type these notes as well? I mean, I think it would be a very good idea. The nice thing about being able to do this live and being able to capture it and post it is that you will be able to watch this video as many times as you like, you know, as a sort of review. And I will post the link to that. So it's going to be super low tech. It's not like flashy PowerPoints or anything like that. It's literally going to be me talking over a Microsoft Word page. But I would like to encourage you. A few days ago, I gave you a handout on Monarchy and also Constitution. And then there was 3 headings: things I knew, things I learned, questions that I still have. And I would actually like to be able to spend some time on the questions I still have. I'm hoping I might even be able to answer some of those, I've been teaching this long enough that I can kind of predict what some of the questions are going to be. And so I'm hoping that as I sort of walk through a recap of last week, that is going to become a little bit more clear for you. So, yeah, here we go. So I'm going to be sharing my screen, and I'll try to keep, coming back to the chat. Again, yeah, underwhelming, right? If you look at this, ooh. But I want to break this down because last week, and I'm not going to repost it because I know there was a separate, video summary of it. We talked about how groups make decisions, and we looked at the different types of governments and the methods that they use in making decisions that are going to impact an entire group. If you are in a country in which you as a citizen have no say whatsoever in who's involved or who's making the decisions, if you're basically told like, hey, here's what's going on and you have no involvement in it, those are the characteristics of an autocratic or authoritarian society. So if we think to, especially famously, I think in one of the videos I talked about, I talked about North Korea, or you could look at, China really as an example as well. These are nations that have incredible restrictions placed on the people who live there. And I mean, there are trade-offs, right? They're able to get stuff done remarkably quickly. But the other factor for that is, if you don't have to worry about stepping on people's rights, if you don't grant them any rights, if you sort of see people as, subjects to be subjugated, it's very easy just to get stuff done. One of the critiques sometimes of democratic nations that it can seem that, there's talking and we don't ever get anything done. And there's some truth to that, right? Sometimes it can sort of seem like discussions get bogged down and action doesn't take place. But we also have to understand that there's an old saying, any government that is big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough to take it all away. So before we look to, like, oh yeah, how can we give the government more power to just get stuff done? We have to also understand the trade-off for that is all of a sudden they're able to just steamroll over you and you don't have a say. So what does a democratic nation look like? And also, how do we make sense of the fact that Canada has a king? On paper, Canada has a king. This isn't like he came to Canada in the previous semester. There was a royal visit, and we were able to watch some of that live. And so a lot of people question, is this some sort of conspiracy theory? We call ourselves a democratic nation, and yet we have a king. How does that work? So I want to highlight a little bit here. If we look at the word democracy, democracy basically means, for the sake of the unit test, rule by the people. But that's not enough. Okay, we can't just leave it at that, because we know that it isn't just, okay, let's just vote on everything and bigger side wins. We have to dig into that a little bit more. But as a definition, that's what rule by the people means. And that's either direct or indirect. So what is a direct democracy? And again, this, I'll tell you right here and now, this is going to be a 2-mark question on your unit test. And if you're panicking, you're like, wait, when's the unit test? Don't worry about it. It's probably at least a couple of weeks away. My doctor thinks that I'll still be out of commission for a little while, but I am hoping to make my return, and we'll worry about all that stuff later. Let's just, not panic about schedule. So direct democracy is when everyone votes on every issue. And the reality is you cannot run a country like this. Cannot run a country like this. Because countries are big and complicated and people are trying to get stuff done. And we do not have time to just sit around and vote on every single issue. So no country does this. Okay, no country really does a direct democracy. So this then brings us to what is known as an indirect, or often known as a representative, if I could spell, democracy. And this is where citizens elect representatives to create and make laws on their behalf. And again, this is just an introductory lesson to this. We haven't yet got into, the different levels of government and what we call these different levels. That's where you're going to get into vocabulary like MP or town councilor, or, who's responsible for different things. That will be a next week thing that we start looking into. But I do not vote on laws. Okay, I am a Canadian citizen. I'm eligible to vote, but I don't vote on direct laws. What I do is I get to vote for the people that I want to represent me when it comes to government, and they will then be the ones that debate and vote on laws. So you will get a question on this, the difference between a direct and an indirect democracy. You're also going to get a question on what is democracy, and this is worth a point, right? Rule by the people. Now, this is also where we're going to spend the rest of our time today, because this is incredibly important. What is a constitution, and what role does it play in a functioning democracy? Okay, because you're going to get a 2-mark question on your unit test, and it's going to say, what does democracy mean? Why is a constitution so incredibly important in order for a democracy to function? And again, when you see the word constitution, I want you to think of it as a foundation. You build a structure on top of a foundation. If you have a strong foundation, then your building will remain standing. If you have a weak foundation or no foundation, everything you build can come crashing down. The whole point of a constitution is actually to put limits on the power of the government in order to protect citizen rights. Government has an important role to play, but we also want to put limits on the power of the government. We do not want to give the government power to just do whatever they want, whenever they want. Because if the government can do whatever they want, whenever they want, that's the hallmarks of an autocratic or authoritarian regime, and we don't want that. Now, this then goes to this question: how is Canada this? Because Canada is a democratic nation, and yet we have a king. And I have a question here: can it be both? And the answer is yes. So what is a constitutional monarchy? Which is what Canada is. A constitutional monarchy is where you have a king or queen. Queen Elizabeth II was the longest reigning British monarch in history. And it's only really been the last couple of years that King Charles III has become our head of state. But you have a king or queen as I'm going to put a word in here, a ceremonial head of state. And when we say ceremony, it's tied to symbolism and history and tradition. It doesn't mean that there's no power whatsoever. But it is largely symbolic. And we're going to unpack that a little bit into, what that means for us. But it means you have a king or queen as a ceremonial head of state, and you have a constitution Constitution to clearly outline the roles and power of the government. So this is how we can have both. We can be a democratic nation and we can have a king as our head of state, because King Charles III has no formal decision-making power in Canada at all. Okay, he has no formal decision-making power in Canada, and that is why he's on our, well, he's actually going to be on our money soon. Like, there's been some coins that they have been released, but he cannot just show up and be like, hey, nice place, I want it, or do anything like that. The Constitution actually outlines his role and his limitations. I'm going to stop during there and actually just look at, see if there are any questions. Oh, I guess one was retracted. Maybe I answered it. I hope that that would be the case. Okay, so I've shared a little bit there. I do want to, because, okay, 10, 10, 20, 30, 40. So again, there's only about 15 minutes left in class. I do want to sort of pause, go back to that sheet that was talking about, questions on Constitution, questions on monarchy. This kind of is your time. If you're watching, I guess there's like 8 people watching. Oh, I got a couple of likes. Well, that's kind. This is your time to be able to ask those sorts of questions from the videos that we watch, actually from anything that you've had in this past week. Now is the time. Again, laws in Canada and the US are very different. Laws in Canada and the UK are very different. Every country has its own way of doing things. The reason why I mention, the UK and the United States is because Canada has a very different history than the US when it comes to gaining our independence from the British Empire. Very, very different history. There's a reason why the United States has a president and not a prime minister, and because they fought the American Revolution to, fully sever the ties between Great Britain and themselves. And if you study American history, you see some of the origins of it. It actually had to do with, hey, what rights do we have as, colonists living, in this land? And they were basically told, listen, you don't really have any rights or say when it comes to things like laws or taxation. And that's actually where the line came from, no taxation without representation, because the colonists were saying, we want to have representatives in government. We want to be able to vote for representatives that are going to, have a say in how things are done. And they were told, listen, you're a colony. You're not like part of the real deal. So you don't really get a say. So you basically have to just sort of shut up and take it. And then eventually the colonists were like, that isn't what, we're not going to do that. Then we will fight you for that. We will start our own country then, where we can start making our own laws and do our own thing. And then they fought the American Revolution, from 1776 to 1781. I've actually been to, it's a neat place to travel, to Yorktown, in the United States, in Virginia. And what's cool about it is that is where the British finally signed the papers that said, all right, we're done. The Battle of Yorktown. And Britain was like, okay, you know what? You're right. You're going to run your own thing. Like, they had fought a bloody Revolutionary War. And Britain finally said, all right, you're your own country. You do your own thing. So that was the birth of the United States. Canada, on the other hand, very different history. Canada, if you remember back to, grade 7 and 8, you'll talk about, things like the voyageurs and, the French Empire, the British Empire, trade with indigenous peoples, the Hudson's Bay Company. is actually the oldest corporation in North America. And even actually just recently, they finally like sort of bankrupted and liquidated their stores. And I think they were purchased by some private equity firm. You don't need to know that for a test or anything, but like the origins of the Hudson's Bay Company were trade for fur, because it was big money to be able to get that fur and, you know, turn it into hats, among other things, and then, you know, to trade European goods to indigenous peoples. That was the origins of a lot of the colonial interaction in British North America, which is now Canada. And that kind of built over time. And as that became lucrative, and as empires were looking to expand their influence, you know, that led to a lot of infighting. You know, if you ever go to Quebec City, you can go to the famous Plains of Abraham. It's kind of like a park now, you know, so it doesn't really look like much. But that was where the famous battle between British forces and French forces took place, you know, for sort of the history of North America. That's when the French were defeated by the British, and that's how the British sort of got their stranglehold into then what would become, you know, the American colonies, British North America. And, you know, then fast forwarding, actually, I know this isn't a history course, but I'm glad I am recording this just for some background. You know, after the American Revolution, Canada, and wait, it wasn't even Canada at the time, actually, British North America fought with the United States in the War of 1812. And that's one of those kind of weird wars where we're like, what kind of happened? Like, so on the one hand, Canadians will say, oh yeah, we whooped the US, we went down, we burned the White House. And that, well, Canadians didn't, because Canada wasn't even technically a country at that time. It was under British colonial control. And it is true that the British were able to repel the invading Americans. There's actually all sorts of really neat, you know, battlegrounds and memorials to go to, especially in the Niagara area, right where between the border of Canada and the U.S. And actually, Brock University is named after a General Isaac Brock, who was very famous in preventing the Americans from being able to invade what was, you know, British North America. But yeah, the War of 1812 was between the British Empire and the new, you know, United States of America. And so when it came time for people in British North America telling the British Empire, hey, you know what, we would actually like to have more of a say in how we do things, the British Empire was like, okay, we're not okay. So I see a question here. Do we have to know this history for the test? Good news. No, you don't need to know anything about Isaac Brock. You don't need to know anything about the American Revolution or the War of 1812. So you have to humor me. I'm just sort of giving you some background context, but I will say this. This does matter. Canada's constitution, and Canada being founded as a nation, the reason why we still have a king as our head of state is connected to that story that I just told you. Okay, because when Canada became its own country, rather than fighting a war like the Americans did, Britain wanted to keep relationship there. So they said, let's do this. Let's let you be your own country. Okay, let's let you be your own country. But at the same time, we are going to stay in close relationship here. So Canada's constitution does enshrine the British monarch as our head of state. That isn't a problem when it comes to you know, lawmaking, etc., because the Constitution makes it very, very clear who's responsible for different things. But I did want to give you a little bit of a background. And again, I will pause for questions because this is your time, right? I know we're doing the old switcheroo for the first time in about 6 minutes or so. So now is your time. Any questions that you have from any of the material, this is a great opportunity for that. And again, if not, we can always have awkward silence, which is fine. Okay. All right. So one of the things I actually think that I might do is I may stop the recording, and what I might actually then post it, and then this video will basically be what is shown to the next class. I realize that's not the same as me seeing them, in person directly. But I think that's probably what we might do. Okay. So one of the questions, when am I coming back? I would like to be able to come back soon. A lot of it depends on recovery time. So it's not anticipated that I'll be back, the next week. But it is very hopeful that I will be able to return after that. And so we'll have to see if the cortisone shots in my spine, do their job and reduce inflammation sufficiently so that I can start walking around again. Then, that might, who knows, I may be able to show up. So I do want to stress that even though I'm not there, you can send messages, like you can contact me via Edsby if you have any questions or concerns, and I will be happy to respond. I'm actually on Edsby quite a bit, so yeah, I think that is the route that we will go. I thank you, those of you, and your kind words. It's not an ideal circumstance, and I realize that these aren't really like super polished videos, but it is what it is. So I think I'm going to, again, appreciate your concerns. I probably shouldn't even reference it because I don't want to draw too much attention to it, because I don't know who it is that's been sort of active in the chat and then retracting their messages. Bit of a distraction, which is too bad. At the same time, what I'll also say with something like that is if that sort of stuff is going to happen, then, that is also going to, prevent us from being able to, as the saying goes, this is why we can't have nice things, right? We want to be able to, do stuff like this. But then if people are potentially, I'm not going to say it's gone that far, but if people are going to sort of, goof around and possibly ruin it, then, we can't take advantage of the resources that we have and do these sorts of things. So I'll sort of say that as gently as I can without drawing too much attention to it. And all right, I'm going to end the stream. Godspeed to all of you. Soon you're going to be doing the old switcheroo. So I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Over and out.